I took 17. One moment. Looks like I have to unmute you. Allow participants to unmute themselves. Good.
Thank you so much.
That was amazing.
Was it good?
That was incredible. Yes. That was incredible. I didn't know that. That's why the sheep get sacrificed.
Huh?
Eid. I didn't know that was why the sheep get sacrificed in Eid.
Yeah, we don't eat them alive.
Is that why? Is that? Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Has anybody got any questions for Fidel? Anything that they've thought of or gone? Yes, Rachel.
My cousin.
I mean, it's not so much about the Hajj, but what's the difference between Sunni and Shia Muslims?
Okay. Well, it's a difference that started political in the beginning, and because of the separation of the two camps for a long time, even big changes in the religion took place, and there are differences, mainly actually differences in the beliefs. So, for example, we don't believe that any human being is infallible except prophets, and they are infallible only when it comes to delivering the message of God in the religion. So even prophets can do mistakes. If a prophet speaks about agriculture, for example, and he's not into this science, then he can do mistakes. But the prophet or any prophet can never deliver the message of God wrongly, and so on. Shia believe that not only the prophet is infallible, but even his descendants are infallible. The imams are infallible. So there is quite a lot of differences actually. But it all started political in the beginning.
And can you tell us the relationship between jihad and Hajj?
Okay, jihad. You know, I have. You know that I'm a filmmaker. I made 3 documentaries about Islam, and one of them is in 31 languages, including Hebrew. And the one about jihad is in 17 languages, including Hebrew. And it's called Jihad on Terrorism, in which I prove to people that jihad does not equal terrorism.
Yeah.
Actually, jihad equals war on terrorism, but the real one. Not war for oil. It's the real war on terrorism. Jihad simply, or I can tell you simply, war is not allowed in Islam, except for a just reason, for a just cause. And it is not called war in this case, it is called jihad. But there isn't really much relationship between jihad and Hajj, though jihad means, there are several meanings for the word jihad. There is verbal jihad, which when you talk against an oppressor, this can put you in jail, like in my country, like in Egypt, okay? Or you can even lose your life if you speak against Sisi. If you still speak, this is a form of jihad called verbal jihad. And there is the jihad against your evil inclinations, to control your desires and yourself. This is called spiritual jihad, and among its forms is Hajj, because Hajj is hard. So any form of doing effort to become better is a form of jihad. So in a sense, you can say that Hajj is one of the forms of jihad, but not all of it. And there is, of course, the third type, which is combative jihad, which is if you go to war for a just cause or to remove oppression. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I was going to ask, because we're in contact with a lot of young people all the time, and a lot of our young people are Muslim. During times like COVID-19 or stuff like that, when there's a lot of disconnection with anyone, is there any advice that you could give to any Muslims when they're going through, if say, for example, if they're going through another Eid like this, or if they were going through another holiday, something where everybody would be connected? I know you talked about the circles around the Kaaba, but is there anything that we could do working with young people to support them at a distance? Muslim young people.
You mean if they go out in a camp or in one of your?
No. Like say for example, we had So, like for example, we had Eid and everything was remote. So we could do something to support them face to face, but instead of that, we were doing everything remotely. Is there anything that we can do from a distance to help support young people who are Muslim, who might be struggling with maybe not being, well, when they weren't able to go to mosque, like if another lockdown happens, not able to go to mosque, if they're not able to, do you know what I mean? If things get changed.
I don't think there is much that you can do, but Muslims love so much when non-Muslims show understanding, show that they understand that there are differences, that they have their own beliefs, that being unable to drink. I'll tell you something. For example, if I'm invited somewhere and there is actually wine on the table, as a Muslim, I cannot sit on that table. Muslims do not only abstain from drinking, we abstain from associating with drinking. We cannot serve it, we cannot sell it, we cannot sit on the same table with it. And of course, we can talk about that. I know it's a very sensitive issue, but if I go somewhere to a dinner and I see that they are not serving wine because they are out of sensitivity, they know that's something sensitive. I appreciate that so much, and I tell them, by the way, guys, I can sit for a while outside in the living room where you can drink if you want. You understand me? So, but I appreciate so much when people understand. You understand me? And of course, some people. My son was asking me actually, why is drinking wine haram? Haram means forbidden. And I told him, listen, how many families were damaged because of drinking and gambling? He said a lot. I said, good. Did you ever wonder why all governments are allowing it? Still, if it damaged a lot of families. He said, no, maybe because there's a lot of tax and business in this. I said, that's right. There's a lot of business in this. God does not compromise your interests for anything. He said, ban, then ban. That's it. So in Islam, we are so strict when it comes to drinking or gambling and stuff like that. So if you show understanding that you are serving halal food for them, you are doing this, you're doing that. But in the wake of COVID-19, we ourselves are confused. There isn't much we can do. But what's good is that our religion is easy. So whatever you cannot do is actually waived.
Echo.
Yeah, there's echo because someone turned on his mic. So the issue is, for example, I have to stand up when I pray. If I cannot stand, I have to pray seated. But I cannot waive the prayer. But I will waive standing. If I cannot prostrate myself for any physical reason, I do not have to prostrate, but I have to the extent that I can pray only with my eyes. If I'm in hospital and I cannot move at all, and I'm completely wrapped, and I will pray with my eyes, but I have to pray. So our religion eased everything, but you have to be in contact 5 times every day with him. Do not unplug yourself. You understand me?
Fantastic. Thank you. Is there anybody got any other questions?
I have a question. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, go on. You go first.
Hi. Okay. I just want to, it's nothing to do with Hajj, but it's something that I think following from Rachel's question about Shia and Sunni differences, I wanted to know your opinion about you as a devout Muslim living in the West. You have to reconcile the secular law that are in this country with Islamic law. And sometimes there's conflict between those two laws, because one is secular and the other one is religious. And how do you, because I think you're talking about severe punishments, and how how does this work if we believe in human rights and human rights protects certain rights of individuals?
That's a very beautiful question. Thank you very much. And we have two things here to talk about: reconciling between the Islamic law and the law of the land in which I live. And the second thing is human rights. Human rights, I'm not going to answer it now, but I can put a link for you for a lecture that I gave in many universities, and the video is for me giving that lecture in Brussels University. It is called the Discovery of Freedom. And it is actually in which I am actually comparing between the Quran and the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights that was issued by the General Assembly of the United Nations in 1948. Not as a book of God and the declaration, no, as two declarations of human rights. And you will be surprised to see that every single human right in the United Nations Declaration exists in the Quran. But there are some human rights that are in the Quran that still are not until today in the United Nations Declaration. For example, you have the right to get married and form a family according to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, but you don't have the right to dissolve a marriage or divorce until today. It's not a human right, which means that if a country does not give you this right, that's not a violation for the Declaration of the United Nations. Countries give it, most countries give it. But if a country decides not to give it, they are okay. In the Quran, you have the right to form a family and to dissolve a family, because you may mischoose, okay? That's first. That's when we talk about the United Nations Declaration or the human rights. I will be sending you something beautiful about that if you want. It's a 45 minutes talk. The second thing, we as Muslims know that we are here, for example, in the UK, and we have the law of God and the law of the land, and they are different from each other. But what's good is that the law of the land does not obligate on us to do things that are against the law of God. For example, in the law of God, I'm not allowed to drink. In the law of the land, I am allowed to drink, but I'm not obligated to drink. So I don't see a problem. I don't see a problem. This was a big issue actually a few years ago when the gay marriages laws changed or allowed gay marriages and stuff like that. And people came to us, what can we do? I said, nothing, nothing. What do you want to do? Nothing. There is nothing new. A new thing in the law of the land that contradicts the law of God, but it's not putting an obligation on us. It's like drinking, it's like gambling. It's allowed in the law of the land, but it's not obligated. No one is obligating on us that type of marriage. Fine, that's it. So this is how we reconcile. When you tell me about punishments, we don't apply these. These punishments are not for individuals to apply. It is for the ruler to apply if the ruler is ruling by the law of God. But the rulers are not ruling by the law of God, so they are not applied. That's it. So if someone steals, we're not going to cut his hand in the UK. And we're not allowed even to do that, by the way. Okay, because it's not the law of the country. This is done only by the government if the government decides to apply that kind of law. I'm not going to debate about that. I'm not going to defend that law, but I'm just telling you there is no problem for us.
I didn't see it as a problem, but I think it becomes problematic when in some countries, Muslim majority countries, like Sudan, where certain punishments are still being implemented.
It is their right to choose which law to apply. And from time to time, they change the laws. The issue is, who are us to tell Sudan which law they should apply?
We all agree on human rights law.
Excellent.
As we belong to United Nations, and if that violates the individual right, if you're homosexual, you get killed. If you commit adultery as a woman, you can get a severe punishment. And who protects you from this? From these
You will not like it if Sudanese start also debating about the law in Britain. It's the law in Britain. You understand me? So everyone has the right to decide what law he will run his country with.
I understand, definitely. But I think we have some sort of sense of, sorry to keep point on this, I think this is something quite, that's very critical of Islam. I think a lot of people criticize Islam for these values. And what I'm talking about is that the world, United Nations, we agreed, if you're part of United Nations, there are certain principles of protecting human life. So you cannot...
I agree with everything in the United Nations, including having 5 countries distinguished, and any one of them can cancel with a veto the hopes and dreams of the 180 other countries. Is this okay for you? Do you think the United Nations is perfect like that?
No, I don't think it's perfect, but we have something that we agreed as humanity, that your rights as an individual to exist should not be just because the majority agreed on a certain religious law.
For example, capital punishment. Some people think that Islam forces capital punishment. That's not true. That's not true. In Islam, I can show you now an ayah or a verse in the Quran. By the way, this is the latest translation of the Quran. And it's my translation, by the way. I spent 4 years translating this translation, and finally it's out only like 2 months ago. And I can show you a verse in the Quran which encourages people to forego the capital punishment. And it tells people the one who will forego the capital punishment will have this mercy and forgiveness as a kind of atonement for his own sins, if you forego the capital punishment. But the difference is, the law of the United Nations forces the waiving of the capital punishment on the family of the deceased, while Islam tells them it's all about your decision. So Islam tells people, the sons and the daughters of the deceased, if you decide that this guy lives, he will live. And you will be forgiven by God if you take that decision. So Islam wants to break the cycle of violence. He doesn't want the man who killed the father of some people to be released from jail after 20 years or 25 years, and then get killed by the sons and daughters of the deceased, and then the cycle continues. Islam encourages the sons and daughters of the deceased to forego the capital punishment and accept a compensation. And the videos of this is all over the internet. I can send you a lot of videos of people who forego the capital punishment and allow the man to live who killed their own father, because they are encouraged to do so. It's all about whose right it is. God says it is the right of the sons and daughters of the deceased. The United Nations law says it is our right. That's the difference. We can debate about that. But I'm telling you, there is also a point in the other side.
Yeah, I do agree that there's justice in Islamic law. I'm not denying that. It just because I think I've seen in some countries with Muslim majority, the punishment of the courts, the Sharia courts, has been a very questionable, approach to certain sins or.
Everyone has questions about the other. I'll tell you something. Cutting off the hand of a thief. It sounds very vulgar and cruel and awful. Let's go to the closest jail here in the UK and ask those who are jailed for 15 years in theft or burglary if they would have preferred to get one hand cut off 15 years ago and go back home with their children, instead of their children being orphaned when their father is still alive and their wives are being divorced or divorcees or widowed while their husbands are still alive. And let's see if there is any percentage of people who will choose to go back home 15 years ago or not. And if you see a good percentage, then you should really re-ask yourself again about that, because sometimes we judge, and it's not for us to judge. That's why we as Muslims, we apply the law of God if it is applied anywhere. If the government decides to apply it, then we apply it. And sometimes we understand the wisdom behind things, and sometimes we do not understand, but we trust him.
Thank you.
That's a really interesting concept. I've never thought or heard of a concept.
I can't hear you, Justin. There's a problem with your microphone.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Now?
Yes, now yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I said that's really interesting. That's really interesting argument for that, and I've never heard that before.
Megan had a question.
And Meg, you...
I'm muted, sorry. Yeah, I was going to ask, so when you were talking about it being very strict with not drinking alcohol and gambling, that kind of thing, I was wondering if there's any kind of, so you know how in like Catholicism, if you do something wrong, you'll go to confession. Is there any, like, what happens if you do break one of those rules? My question.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. By the way, I was raised in a Catholic school. I got my education for 12 years in a Catholic school. So you can say a Catholic Muslim. I'm joking, of course. No, we don't have confession. We have something else called repentance. And you remember when I spoke about the original sin, I said that the story of Adam and Eve eating from the tree is still there in Islam. But we learn from it something different from what Christians learn from it. In Christianity, the law of God was broken, and that's huge. And someone should be punished. But because no one can pay that huge price, God himself paid the price by sending his only begotten son to die for us on the cross. That's the Christian version of the story. In Islam, the law of God was broken. And that's huge. But no sin is bigger than the mercy of God. All what Adam and Eve had to do is to raise their hands and ask forgiveness in a certain way, which God taught them. And the statement that they were given was this: "Oh God, indeed we have wronged ourselves, and if you forgive us not, we are losers." So before asking forgiveness, you have to be self-critique. And that's the first lesson we took in the history of humanity, self-criticism, because we're all the time criticizing others. We criticize our spouses, we criticize our parents, we criticize the government. Rarely when we criticize ourselves. We keep criticizing everyone else. So the first lesson was being self-critique. We have sinned and we screwed up. Forgive us. And God forgave them. So that was the lesson. No sin is ever bigger than God's forgiveness. All you need to do is repent. So that's what we learn. And Prophet Muhammad told us that he asks forgiveness about 100 times every day. And this is very problematic for us because Prophet Muhammad doesn't sin. Why will he ask forgiveness? Ask forgiveness from what? Ask forgiveness from being unable to thank God enough for his grace and for his gifts. Because no human being can show appreciation enough for God. So we can also ask forgiveness. God, forgive me because I can't show appreciation enough. So there is a relationship between the human being and God, because we believe that God breathed the soul in every human being. So there is a part in me which is responsible for the communication with God. We believe that we cannot deal with God with the five senses. We cannot see him, we cannot hear him, we cannot touch him, we cannot smell him, we cannot taste him. But we can deal with him spiritually because he breathed into us the spirit.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for that, Fidel.
Can I ask a question, please, Justin? Do we still have time?
Yes, all right, yeah, cool.
I have a question after as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much, Fidel, for being here today and for answering our questions. Mine is going on a little bit from what Heaven and Rachel have said about the history of Islam, but also bringing it back to the present, the interpretation of the text. You yourself said that you just have written a translation of it, which obviously is always down to interpretation when you take the original text into a different language. But how is this then, let's call it historic flexibility of original text, original rules and regulations and procedures, bringing that into how humanity and society evolves over time? How much flexibility is there, and is in newer translations, is that taken into the present? Does that make sense?
Well, a translation is in a sense an interpretation, because it's not the original language. So mine is different. Mine is a bit literal, actually, and that's because I wanted. I'll tell you something. Many even non-Arab speaking Muslims did not know before my translation came out. God spoke about the hereafter about 500 times in the Quran, all of them in past tense. 165 translations before mine changed it to future tense because it sounds strange when a book is talking about a future event in past tense. And that's one of the reasons why I made my translation. My translation is not about the meanings of the word of God. It's about the style of God in speech. God did not do a mistake 500 times and spoke about a future event in past tense. God wanted to tell you that it's future event for you, but not for him. God is outside time and space. So when God talks, he talks from his knowledge, and everything happened already in his knowledge. And this leads us to another pondering thing that to ponder about is that, do we have freedom of choice? If God knows what will happen in the future, so is he influencing our choices to choose what he knows? Because we have to do what he knows. So we believe that human beings have complete freedom of choice. And God's knowledge is not the kind that influences choices. Like a good teacher who have experience with his students can tell you before the exam who will pass and who will fail, because he's a good teacher and he knows his students. But still, no one can blame him for those who failed. It is totally 100% the responsibility of every student. God is the all-knowing and the one who has full knowledge. So he knows what you will do even before you. I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. I was once invited to go and talk in a church in New Jersey. I used to live in the United States. By the way, I'm a survivor of 9/11. I don't know if you know that or not, but I was an electronic engineer, and that incident changed what I'm doing. I dedicated my life to bridge gaps between Muslims and non-Muslims since 9/11. Anyway, I was invited to talk in a church in New Jersey, and my son was 3-year-old, and he stood in the doorway. He said, "Dad, I'm coming with you," and he's wearing his pajama. I said, "Anas, I don't have time. Please move. Give me the way. I don't have time. I will be back within a couple of hours to take you out with your daughter, with your sister, to Chuck E. Cheese's. It's a place where children torture parents." He said, "No," and he insisted, and he started to cry nervously, and that was weird. And I looked at his sister, his elder sister. He always liked to be with her. I said, "Fatima, are you coming with me?" She said, "No, I'm waiting for Arthur. It's a cartoon, a very important cartoon every Sunday." I said, "Anas, first of all, your sister is not coming. Second, you will miss your cartoon, your favorite cartoon." He said, I don't care about her, and I don't care about the cartoon, and I want to come with you. And that was so strange. He's 3-year-old. He never comes with me anywhere alone. So I dressed him up quickly. I took him in my car, and I made it on time, thanks God, to the church. When we entered, there were some coloring books in the back, and I was really worried that he starts crying in the middle of my lecture and says, I want to go to mama or stuff like that. So I said, Anas, would you like to sit in the back and color in these coloring books quietly? Or would you like to come to the front and sit with me, but you have to be quiet? He said, I will color in the coloring books. Guess what? The reverend of the church stopped me and told me, you have a big contradiction in your religion. In the beginning, you said you have freedom of choice, and now you're telling us that God knows everything, even what will happen in the future? This means that God has to influence your choices to choose what he knows. And I never had a good answer for this, but I was inspired by my son. And I said, when I entered in the morning, I told my son, choose freely, and I did not influence his choices. Either you sit in the back and color, or come with me to the front and sit and watch. And before he opened his mouth, I was sure 99%, not 100%, that he will choose the coloring book. Why? Because I'm his father. Because I have experience with his age. Why don't you think that your creator can know 100% your choices without influencing it? Understand? So this is the issue. Islam is a philosophy, by the way. It's very philosophical. But the problem is, many Muslims don't even understand that philosophy. So if you understand that book, you will never be violent, believe me. If you understand that book, you will always be just. And I have a good lecture for you about jihad. It's called Jihad on Terrorism, in which it explains that Islam is neither a religion of peace nor a religion of war. It's a religion of justice. And God told us in the Quran that justice should be achieved through peaceful means. Don't resort to violence at all, except if you fail to achieve justice through peaceful means. So that's why you find people like Palestinians sometimes throwing stones, because they tried everywhere else, everything else. And they were let down by the United Nations, let down by the Arabs, let down by everyone. So they start throwing stones. So this is the issue. We have to understand, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of others and try to know, why are they thinking like that? Why are they acting like that? That's in my opinion.
So could we then say, and after that I'm going to shut up, could it then be said, after everything that you just, the whole lecture about the philosophers, Islam, and that it's a peaceful religion in itself, that all those governments and groups that instrumentalize Islam as a religion that demands that they do X, Y, and Z, which involves violence, is nothing but an instrumentalization and is actually condemnable by true Islam?
Yes, people are using Islam to justify whatever they are doing. If they attack another country, they use Islam to justify that. If they, for example, recently, the United Arab Emirates made a peace treaty or whatever with Israel, and they are using Islam also to justify that what they did is not betraying Palestinians, and then they used Islam and they used Muslim scholars to say that that's okay. So that's the problem. At the time of Mubarak, he was, if the opposition announced boycotting elections because it's a rigged election, he uses Islam and he uses official Muslim scholars to go and say it is forbidden in Islam to boycott elections. Why? Because in Islam, we are forbidden from abstaining from testifying. And voting is a way of testifying. But they forgot that boycotting elections is a way of testifying as well. Understanding? So unfortunately, Islam has been used by many sides. The issue is, who's really using it right? It's up to everyone to think well before he does something like that or uses something, because it is very dangerous when people claim that God said things when he meant the opposite. Very dangerous for them. They will be asked one day, who told you to do that? Okay.
Thank you so much. And can we have one last question quickly, if that's okay, Fidel? And that was Stacey.
Yeah, sorry. I just think so I've
can't really hear you. Sorry.
Oh,
Stacey,
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I've been incredibly lucky in the past to work with two amazing imams in HMP Brixton and in Wormwood Scrubs. And just one of the things that I was hoping that we could get some advice from is obviously from our ECs and my perspective, we actually work with obviously young people from Islam faith, that sometimes because we have the barrier of not knowing the intrinsicity of what Ramadan and Friday prayers look like, sometimes they try and I only know this from my experience with Wormwood Scrubs and Brixton, where actually the imams was like, no, you still work, you still do your day-to-day, it's not a get out of jail free card, excuse the pun, but the imams were really brilliant at actually making sure that the gentlemen that we were working with at the time were still practicing their day-to-day life with jobs. And I'm just thinking that with some of the young people that we work with, if they try and say, you know, oh, it's Ramadan, I'm not able to go out for job interviews, or it's Friday, I need to move this, is there anything that you would give us advice to support those young people to say about how actually those religious events are actually part of still your standardized life, and actually you have to, you know, move prayer if it's an interview or work or something along those lines?
Yeah, this needs a lecture about fasting actually, and the philosophy of fasting, because actually fasting, especially here in the UK, fasting here is very difficult in summer, because the fasting day reaches 18 and 19 and 20 hours sometimes. While in Egypt, we used to fast for 15 hours only, but 15 hours in a worse atmosphere, in hotter atmosphere. But still, being unable to drink or to eat for 20 hours is hard. So definitely it is hard to work at that time. But in Islam, the more you suffer and show patience, the more rewarded you are. So as a Muslim, I should not try to escape from my duties in work, but it is also good for my boss if my boss shows understanding and not give me like very difficult tasks at that time. The issue is in winter is completely the opposite. It's very easy to fast here in winter because the fasting day reaches 12 hours, which is much, much less also than it is, for example, in Egypt. So the issue is definitely, yes, fasting a long day and working the same as usual is hard, definitely. And I encourage, I usually do that. I take my annual break sometimes in Ramadan so that I can manage. But if you are the boss of a Muslim and you know that Ramadan these days is in summer and it's long, you can show some flexibility with him. That's good to do.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much for that. Yeah, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you so much, Fidel, for teaching us about that and different aspects of Islam as well. And yeah, everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fidel.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
bye.
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.